Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is our fourth Coffee with Cade, where we present a conversation, not a presentation. This evening, we're going to talk a little bit about adoption and foster care, and really adoption being an amazing option to helping you and many others build their families and overcome infertility. We've got some fantastic guests in our studio this evening. I'm going to introduce them, and I'm going to let them tell you a little bit about why they are here. First, we have Miss Alex Williams from the Barker Foundation, the Barker Adoption Foundation, which is a national nonprofit that assists families with adoption, and Alex will share a little bit about more about what she does momentarily. Then we have Mr. Andre Wells, who is the founder and CEO of AGX, but he's here wearing a different hat today because he has a very personal story connected to adoption and why it's so important to him. And last but certainly not least, we have Mrs. Nishi Randall, who is the Cade Foundation office manager, but she's also a woman who is considering, she and her husband, who's in our studio audience today, shout out to Brian, are considering foster care to adoption. I also want to thank my husband, Jason, who's in the studio audience today. We always want to shout out our studio audience. So if we could all raise our mugs, I want to ask you guys out there, what's in your cup? I'll ask you, Alex, what's in your cup?
I'm drinking a chai tea latte.
Very
my favorite.
Yes, I like it.
Actually, I have house blend, Dunkin' Donuts, no creamer.
Okay, straight. No creamer. That bitter stuff. I like it.
I have pure water.
Pure water, and I'm drinking a little bit of H2O as well. So let's go ahead and get started. And again, as is always the case, if you have questions, if you have comments, feel free to just jump online and share your questions or comments, and we'll do our best to get those answered throughout the conversation. I also want to highlight, we are all drinking out of our Overcomer mugs, our Cade Foundation mugs, and if you'd like one, please let us know. We'd be happy to share one with you for a small donation to the foundation. I also want to make you aware of this book that came out. I released my first novel, which is a short illustrated graphic novel. It's called The Good Book About Infertility, and a portion of the proceeds from each book are available, will go to the Cade Foundation. And the books are on Amazon Prime, Amazon Kindle, and basically any place else where books are sold. So if you buy a copy, a portion of that will support the Cade Foundation. So, shameless plug. Thank you. Thank you. Very excited. So, Alex, tell us a little bit about your work with Barker and why being here tonight was important for you.
So, I work for the Barker Adoption Foundation. We are a private nonprofit adoption agency. We're located in Bethesda, Maryland. Like was mentioned, we work nationally, but we can only work with families in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, but we can place children from all over the country, and then we have international programs as well. So I'm our outreach coordinator for the Older Child Program. It's called Project Wait No Longer. Project Wait No Longer really kind of focuses on placing children out of the foster care system who are waiting to be adopted. So currently there are over 400,000 kids in foster care, and a little over 100,000 of those kids are waiting to be adopted. So I come do things like this and work with the Cade Foundation and other organizations to kind of spread the word about older child adoption and why it's important and the kids that are waiting. So I'm really happy to be here. And
we'll repeat this at the end of the program, but can you really quickly give us the contact information for Barker in case someone right now wants to write that down and follow up?
Yeah, so our website is www.barkeradoptionfoundation.org.
Okay.
And if anyone wanted to give us a call, our phone number is 301-664-9664. And then you can email me at awilliams@barkerfoundation.org.
And do you do known, like, relative adoption? If someone wants to adopt a child from within the family, do you all also handle that type of adoption?
Typically, it depends. Typically, that would occur before we would come in to the situation. Typically, if it was a kinship adoption, that would happen while the child was in foster care within the foster system.
I see.
So really, we're working with the kids who are waiting for adoption, who the caseworkers have not been able to find a family to adopt them. So really, our kids are the ones that are waiting the longest and are most in need of families.
And before we move on, one last question. Cost. What is the cost if I wanted to adopt, let's say, a 14-year-old? Because older children need families too, right? You do have older kids in the foster system.
Yes, definitely. And the older kids are really what we focus on. So when a child reaches the age of 10, they're about 50% less likely to be adopted. So in order to work with our program, families have to at least be open to up to age 12, and we really focus on 12 and older. But so for cost, we're relatively affordable for private adoption. Our fee scale ranges from $3,500 to $8,000 based on your income. A lot of times, though, the state will contract with the state to pay a portion of those adoption fees. And
That's for the application?
That's for the entire process. So $3,500 to $8,000 is kind of the entire process. On occasion, depending on the state, and depending on the needs of the children you adopt, sometimes the state will provide a monthly subsidy for additional therapeutic services or educational services, things like that. So there's a lot of supports in place for families, and we really, our fees are kind of really low so that we can, we don't want price to kind of, to make older child adoption not available to families that are really passionate about it. So
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Yes, thank you.
Andre.
Yes.
Why do you care about adoption?
Yeah, adoption is huge to me. It started when I was 15 years old. I had my dear son Joshua Robinson, who's probably watching from Michigan right now. I don't know if he is. I was 15 years old, a sophomore in high school, and my girlfriend at the time, she was pregnant, and we decided to not have an abortion. We figured if we couldn't raise him, that we were going to give him to someone. And I don't like the word give him. It's more like transfer, you know? Because energy can't be created, nor can it be destroyed. It only can be transferred. So we transferred the love baby, Joshua, if you will, to John and Geraldine. And John and Geraldine, oh my gosh, you know, these are two phenomenal parents that to this day are not just parents to Josh, but parents to me and my family.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they're really good people. They were 40 when Joshua came into their lives. Again, I was 15. So what I came to realize when we all reunited in 2010 was that there's so many emotions that come with the adoption process, from the transfer of love to the mother and the young father being without, to the young child now being with a new family who has nothing but love to give. You know, so there's a wealth of emotions that are all caught up some 15 years later. And only by God's grace that, you know, we are all stabilized and surrounding Joshua with love, and it's so beautiful. It's something you don't see. It is beautiful. We are lucky. When we transferred Joshua into the hands of Josh and Geraldine, John, his father, is adopted.
Wow.
And his adoption was a closed adoption. He didn't get a chance to meet his parents, and so they wanted the adoption for Joshua to be open. And so from the time we transferred Joshua to them, there were letters written, and you know, years went by where we didn't communicate, but we eventually came back together.
That's awesome.
And it's been beautiful. It's been beautiful.
That's awesome.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
I love, first of all, that you're a man talking about this, because first of all, there's this perception that adoption is a female thing. It's not a female thing. It's a family thing. And the choice, I could just tell by looking at you and hearing the emotion in your voice that it wasn't a choice that you and the child's mother undertook lightly. I'm sure you gave serious thought to the type of home that you wanted your son to be raised in. And I'm just really excited to see the beauty of this bigger family that he really was chosen into. So, you know, there's not a lack of love on any perspective. He's got all this love coming at him from all these perspectives. So Josh, if you're listening out there, please let us know how you're feeling and participate. We'd love to hear your voice in this conversation. Nishi. Hi, and I want to also just recognize and celebrate Nishi. This whole Coffee with Cade concept is Nishi's brainchild. She was the one, absolutely,
I love my coffee,
that said we need to do Coffee with Cade. And Nishi, if you could just for 2 seconds talk about why you said we needed to do that, and then why are you, even though you are the one, if you call the Cade Foundation office, you talk to Nishi. She is the front line for Cade. So most of you have probably spoken with her and didn't know who you were speaking with. But why are you sitting in front of the camera today?
I'd like to share a little bit of my story. First of all, I've struggled with infertility, so being at the Cade Foundation is awesome. It's been enlightening. It's taught me so much. And Camille has been right there just helping me with my walk. It's been a struggle. And then we kept talking about this child named Jamal. And Jamal is my future foster care to adopt child.
Wow.
Camille named him, so right now he's imaginary, but I know there's a Jamal somewhere.
He's out there.
My husband and I have been talking about going into the foster care program and doing foster care to adopt. It's very important to me because I see a lot of children out there who struggle, and they have a place in my heart, and I really feel like I have a lot to offer them, especially the ones who draw my attention are the ones who are pushed aside and the ones who have been abused in any type of way in the foster care system. And our dream is to open our home to, I say, a few. He says start with one, but we'll start wherever we start. Siblings would be beautiful, so that is our desire. We have looked into foster care to adopt, and so we haven't started our training or anything yet, but this is, our marriage is pretty new, so we are working towards that goal.
That's awesome. And I love the way that you started by, this is what I feel like we can offer this child or these children. So often when people think about having children, it's for what can kids offer me? I'm lonely. I want to be a mom. I want to be a dad, as opposed to thinking, what can I give this child? How can I really change their life or improve their life? So, and I know Nishi, and we talk about a lot of things. Her heart is certainly with children, and I know that when she brings Jamal into her home, he's going to be a lucky little boy. Him and his sister.
Nice.
Yes.
Okay? Did I just say that? Aisha. Jamal and Aisha. Okay. Studio audience, do we have any questions from the online community? No, we're going to go ahead and keep moving. Okay, so let's get started. Tell me a little bit about the average family that comes to you. Are there any restrictions? Do you allow people who are single or who have other children to adopt? Who can't adopt? Let's start with that. Who's not allowed to adopt?
So depending on what type of adoption you want, there are, for international adoption, for example, there are different restrictions for different countries. So some countries you can't have more than one divorce, and just random kind of restrictions like that. And it depends on the agency as well. But what I will say is that adoption is a beautiful thing that I think touches so many different types of people. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say there's one type of family that adopts. I actually talk to our program director about this all the time because I do all of our outreach, and so I'm always questioning, like, where do I go? Like, who is adopting older children? Mm-hmm. And it's really kind of, the answer is all types of people, because so many people find it in their hearts to want to adopt an older child, but there are some solid things that would prevent you from being able to adopt, like like different felonies, if you're convicted of any felonies, you know, any convicted of any child, like violence against any children, things like that. For private adoption, sometimes the cost can be a barrier to some families, especially if you're looking at international or domestic infant adoption.
Wait. Speaking of cost, I want to make sure that anyone out there knows that Cade Foundation has a grant which will provide up to $10,000 to help with the cost of adoption or fertility treatment. So if you need more information about that, please visit us online, www.cadefoundation.org. And we also, on our resource page, list dozens of other organizations that also provide grants for adoption and fertility treatment. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. That's a great plug. Because I mean, I think it's overwhelming when families sometimes are looking into adoption in general and trying to figure out what type of adoption they want to pursue, and then they hear the cost of especially international and domestic infant and they freak out. And so I think it's wonderful to have those resources available. But kind of in conclusion, so many types of families adopt. It's not you know, there's not like one specific person or one. It's not like there's not a special quality about any one special quality about any of these families. Just these families kind of find it in their hearts to want to adopt, and so yeah.
Okay, so how about this, really quick, like machine gun, yay or nay, round robin, right?
Sure. Okay.
Single, yes or no?
Oh yes, definitely.
Married?
Yes.
Divorced?
Yes, for the most part.
One divorce?
It depends.
That's a good question.
Domestic adoption, yes, definitely. International, it gets a little tricky with different countries, and I'm not fully fluid in all of the laws of each country, so I don't. But if anyone has any questions about a specific country, they can contact us.
Okay. When I said single, I think most people probably assume single woman, single man.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, you guys? Really quick, round robin.
Was the answer as far as the yearly annual income? Is there a cap on that?
No. So through our agency, if you're applying, you know, you do kind of have to go into detail about your finances, and there's no kind of minimum requirement. We just want to make sure that after you've paid all of your fees and all of that stuff, that you're still going to be comfortable and willing and are able to parent a child.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
So no. Yeah.
So if a family's, you know, if they have too much debt, basically you'll see that as maybe a red flag when it comes to adopting a child.
Yeah, it just depends on the situation, and if that's a question for people, they can always contact us and ask. And I think it's a lot of times case by case basis for finances, but
that makes sense.
We live in America.
I've read also with
everyone's in debt.
the old child support. Also read that you don't qualify for foster care to adopt.
Oh, interesting. I wasn't aware of that rule, but yeah.
So I want to give a shout out. Alex is with the Barker Adoption Foundation, okay? And we'll have her information online when we leave. So Andre, tell me a little bit about the 2010 kind of reunion that took place. And I know that there was another one that took place quite recently.
Yeah.
As a man who placed a child for adoption, you know, when you were young, and you know, it was an unplanned pregnancy. You're a full-grown man right now. This man is retired from the military special forces. I mean, he's come full circle.
Yeah.
You know, how can you talk a little bit about that experience? How it felt for you and for your family, your built family that you've had since you were a young man. So,
I think the process that, it's funny when I hear you explain the process on the other side. Mm-hmm. I remember being the young kid at the agency. All I remember is everybody being taller than me. Here I am, a 15-year-old kid though, right?
Right.
It's just the whole experience. It's like, oh, it's surreal. But I remember going through the list of families, and there were maybe 2 or 3 pages full, and we were reading each one. Mm-hmm. And John and Geraldine obviously were supposed to be Josh's parents, but it was in their description of who they were as people and why they wanted a child that really gravitated us to them. And so that allowed us to really keep an open mind from the beginning that this was going to be, when Josh was ready,
Yes.
there was going to be a reunion. I knew in my
Yes.
heart that I was not going to not let that happen, right?
Awesome.
So it was in 2010 when that happened, and he was probably he was 15.
Okay.
He was 15. He was my age when I had him.
Wow.
And so he asked his father, who was John. He said, "Man, my dad was 15 when he had me. Here I am in this 15-year-old body, and I get it." John and Geraldine are both doctors in their profession when it comes to psychiatry and psychology and nutrition. This is what they do. So, they're always on the always ready to talk about what needs to be talked about.
That's good.
Right?
That's
Because they want that around Joshua. And these are real people.
Mm-hmm.
Real people that have themselves experienced life. And because of that, we've kind of dropped the facade
Yes.
and just became vulnerable. And with that vulnerability, there came some pain,
Mm-hmm.
both good and what we thought was probably unnecessary pain, but it had to happen. When I tell you, in 2010, the emotions were wealthy. They were wealthy, and it took probably a year for us all, maybe 2 years, to adjust to that reunion. We are just now adjusting to that reunion,
Mm-hmm.
and it's 5 years later, right? But we've given each other that space.
Yes.
You have to give each other the space, and you have to allow each other to experience or express what they've experienced, and not take any of that for granted.
Right.
Right? But to live in the moment and to really look at it from their perspective and say, wow, this was just as emotional for you as it was for me. You know what I mean? So,
Yes.
But yeah, I'm an adult now. Josh is an adult. He's 22. He's a bright kid. He's a soccer player. He played semi-pro soccer. He went to Kalamazoo College, which is like an Ivy League school. He's a phenomenal kid. And when I look at him now, I'm in awe myself. He and I are both in awe of each other, I think. And
Awesome.
that within itself is going to allow us to grow as father and son, because we respect each other on that level. And he's not my friend, but he's my son.
That's right.
And he reminds me of that. He has to remind me of that. He's 22 years old.
Yes.
And like, look, I'm not your friend, I'm your son.
That's right.
Right? And so that, for me, gives me the affirmation that, yeah, this was the right thing to do. This kid is solid, man. He's a solid kid.
So for those people who are out there that are thinking, I don't know, I'm scared that if I adopt in 3 years and 4 years and 5 years and 10 years, the birth parents are going to come back and my child isn't going to love me anymore. Can you speak to that?
So John and Geraldine had that happen to them. Josh was, and I know prior to Josh, they had a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
They had her maybe for close to a month,
Mm-hmm.
and the mom came back,
Mm-hmm.
and they were shattered. They were shattered. So you have to, and this is for them. They learned this as well.
Mm-hmm.
How you have to be open to all of the realities
Yes.
that will and could happen when humans are involved.
Yes.
Because emotions are so, emotions are emotions. And so, they had that experience where the young lady was taken back to be with the birth mother. But that's when Josh came into their life.
Okay.
Right afterwards. But it was an experience for them, and they still, I'm sure, it still hurts them a little bit. Because
So how
again,
does
these
that
are
go?
people.
Like with foster care to adopt, which is a little different, right? Because yours wasn't foster care to adopt, yours was adoption.
Right, so Joshua was with, actually, while they were looking for a home for Joshua, he did stay with a foster
Okay.
care family, but it was like one lady, and he was there for like maybe 4 or 5 weeks. I can't remember vaguely. Yeah.
So when you're doing foster care to adopt, that process, and you have a child who you are really just foster care at the moment. It's not quite adoption, but that is your goal. And what's the process? So if I had a child and the child was living with me for a year, now I'm really open to that child having contact with their parents. I think it's really important for children to know who their parents are, and to have that established relationship if that's something that's healthy. But what about if you're going to adopt that child? Can the parents come back and in the foster care program? Can they come back and say, no, you know what? We don't want to allow that person to adopt our child. We want the child back. Does that happen?
No. So if a child is, say, in your care for 18 months, and the state has worked with their biological family has worked with them extensively to try to get them to get the family situation healthy enough for the child to return, which is the goal of foster care, which we fully support, and which is what's beautiful about foster care is, supports are put in place for families to kind of to get back on track so that they can care for their children. But if that doesn't happen, and your foster child has been in your care for 18 months and they become eligible for adoption, which means the court has terminated their parents' parental rights. It's the caseworkers and the state and your local agency that's making that decision. It's not the birth parents.
So is it 18 months? Is that the amount of time?
Typically, I would say it just depends on the situation. Sometimes they'll have supports in place for longer. Sometimes it just depends on the situation and where the birth family is. But if it's kind of consistently proven that this relationship isn't healthy and it's not healthy for the child to return, then they'll kind of move to the adoption track. But yeah.
So what I understood was for kids who are in the foster to adopt program, parental rights have already been terminated, right?
Yeah. So really the foster to adopt is really what we talk about for parents. So if you become a foster parent, you would, and you're interested in adoption, you would go in as a foster to adopt parent. So you would say, I'm a foster parent, but I'm open to adoption. For kids entering the system, they're just in foster care. Gotcha. And so really the main goal is and Maryland is really heavily focused on birth family reunification. So whether that's like a kinship adoption where another member of the family adopts, or the state is able to kind of successfully really rehabilitate the birth family to have the children return.
But can you say, I don't want any kids that are still connected? Can you say, I only am willing to accept children who have been
a closed adoption?
No, not closed, but
who are eligible for adoption.
Who are eligible for adoption.
Yeah, so that's when kind of a program like ours comes in. So we're a little different than foster care. So we have like a public-private partnership, I'd say. So we do no fostering. We only facilitate adoption of children in foster care that are eligible for adoption. Gotcha. And so a lot of our families do come to us saying, we would love to be foster parents, but we couldn't really handle like kind of the heartbreak of having a child in our home for a year and then they go back with their parents. Mm-hmm. And there are 100,000 kids in care that are currently eligible for adoption. So there's lots of opportunities for matches to be made that way. So if a family is open to just strictly adoption from foster care, then that's where a program like ours would come in.
So if someone was interested in that, would they go to you all or their local foster care or whatever agency? Let's say they're in Dallas, Texas, and they want to do that. Could they contact you? Or would they need to go to a local agency and say, I only want what are the words that they would need to say so that they would only get that child that could be adopted?
So again, it depends kind of on the state. For Barker, mm-hmm. we can work with families in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So if a family is interested in older child adoption, they can give us a call or go to our website, email me, come to one of our info meetings. We have an info meeting every month.
That's great.
Say there's a family in in Texas, they would go to their local. I would suggest going to your local county and asking them what your options are if you want to adopt from foster care, and just kind of advocate for yourself and know that, and let them know that you're very serious about adoption. A lot of times states like Maryland, for example, will, if families are only really focused on adoption and don't really want to foster but just want to adopt, they'll send them to agencies like ours, just because just the state needs good foster parents, and so that's kind of really what they're focused on. But
I got it.
But yeah.
Are there people who are foster parents and would just take a child in for a little while and then another one, kind of just like, because that's just what the system allows or how it goes?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. So I was at another event at a church in Arlington recently, and I met a foster mom who has been fostering for 30 years.
Wow.
And she had fostered one of the girls that we placed through our program, and she saw the girl in our scrapbook that I have on our table, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, this is my old foster baby." And this woman, incredible woman, has fostered over like 115 kids, and purely just takes kids in and fosters them until they're either ready to be adopted or go back with their birth families, and that's just kind of what she does. And so yeah, there are lots of foster parents like that who just know that they have love to give, and are okay with kind of the way that the foster system works.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so there are families like that too. But I would say a lot of families that call me or get sent to me from social services are really wanting to adopt, and I'm glad that we have things like this, because a lot of times people don't even know that you can like just adopt straight from foster care, and don't know that our program like ours exists. So
I didn't know that.
So
yeah, that's really good to know.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I'm going to give one more question. Do we have any questions from our studio audience or our online audience? Okay. Well, what time is it?
7:03.
All right, I want to be respectful of the time. I really appreciate everyone for logging in tonight. Remember, the Good book, G-U-U-D book about infertility, available right now online, and a portion of the proceeds will support Cade Foundation and programs like the one you're watching right now. Thank you, Ms. Alex Williams from the Barker Adoption Foundation, Mr. Andre Wells, AGX, and Mrs. Nishi Randall. I appreciate you guys. What's in your mug?
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.